No.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Game Changers Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, and this week I'm doing another one of my solo episodes. So I got a couple things written down that I want to talk about today, but really the last month for us, we've had a lot of challenges on the sales and the acquisition side. Um, I shifted some things around, and one of the main things is that I'm going to be jumping back into closing. I do have some people setting appointments for me, which is definitely going to help me get enough appointments in order to close what I need. But I think one of the lessons that I learned from this is as I was onboarding people before, I was onboarding them with too much at once. I had people starting and setting appointments for themselves and then going to run and close those appointments. And that we've kind of changed the setup now where we're hiring everyone first as an inside sales rep, whether it's local in Jacksonville or remote. And actually, we're getting a lot of remote people because we have our job up all over the country and actually all over the world. Um, but we're starting everyone there. And I think you might have heard if you listened to our episode about a month ago, we part of it is creating this automated onboarding process for new inside sales reps. So that's actually starting to work out. We had one of our guys who's still with us now. Uh, he started a little over 4 weeks ago. So he just made it kind of through the end of the 30-day onboarding. Of course, it's not 30 days of training, but I get the most important things done in the first few days. So, they're on the phones day one, but they're learning more throughout the training. So that's been something that I think was a really big mistake of mine looking back, is just throwing people in to learn too much at once. Um, so with me jumping back into closing, one of my goals now is to document everything that I do. And that way my team can put all that content together. And now in a few months, once I possibly move some of those inside sales reps to closing, they're going to have a lot of training materials that were pretty effortless for me to create because all I'm doing is documenting what I do. So by that, I mean every phone call that I'm on, if I'm sitting down and making sales calls, I'm recording it not just on audio, but also on video. I realize that that helps people a lot because they can see my body language and how that affects my tone of voice. Um, I also get to kind of show them on my screen too, like how I interact with the CRM, which I think is something that I overlooked a long time ago of how important it is to really not even just have a basic understanding, but have a really good way in the CRM to track all your leads. And we had the way, it just, I don't think I had the best onboarding in order to get people to learn that piece by piece. I mean, I had documentation that showed them how to use the CRM, but this now will have them kind of shadow me doing it live. I noticed before when I would have sales reps shadow me live making calls, they would make a lot of progress because they would see not just how I made the calls, but how I interacted with the CRM and just like how quickly I actually go through and how many calls and conversations I'm actually able to hold in just an hour. So that's one part I'm doing. I'm gonna be recording a lot of stuff while I'm on calls, explaining it while I'm listening to the phone ringing so that they can see all the stuff that I'm doing in the CRM and sharing my screen. And then after my appointments, I've also been making some recap videos. So those could be appointments that are phone appointments or an in-person appointment. I'm just taking my phone after and I'm talking about, what made this a good appointment? Should this appointment have been set? Um, what are some questions or challenges, objections that the seller had? What are some things I did well and some things that I would have done differently looking back? So I think that's really going to help, in the future as we move some people to closing, that they'll have all this documentation. And what I realized by building that out for the inside salespeople is it made it a lot easier for me to onboard people without having to put in as many hours myself. I did, though, realize one thing when I created that automated onboarding process that I think is still very important for me to do one-on-one with people, which is within their first week, is uh, to shadow them and give them some feedback, probably 2 or 3 times for about, call it 40 minutes each. And we're actually starting to implement that more into we have a daily sales training, and we're shadowing each other now at least once a week. And I think if I do move people to closing, I'm going to continue that where even outside of the training, they're each going to have to shadow each other for about an hour once a week, because I think there's so much value there to watch how someone else approaches it and to have someone else give you feedback. Um, so yeah, the last few weeks though, just to be 100% straightforward, have been pretty slow in terms of deals. Um, so I think I just started jumping back into closing on Thursday. So I'm pretty confident with me back in this role that that number is going to increase. And I think it's not just necessarily because I have a lot of experience closing, but I'm also going to provide a lot of feedback to the people setting appointments every day. So they'll be able to set better appointments, which are going to hopefully lead us to having a better and higher closing rate. And not just a higher closing rate, but I'm really interested in tracking a metric that I think is really important and that I want to create a baseline for new sales reps, which is revenue per an issued appointment. I was going back and forth before. It's like, do I care about conversion rate? Like, do I care that this rep converts 1 in 4 appointments to a contract and this rep converts 1 in 6? And you would think that yes, that's important, but I realize that actually the answer is really like that's not the metric that I should be looking at. The metric I should be looking at is for every appointment that rep gets set for them, how much revenue on average do they bring back? If you have a rep who goes out there and only closes 1 in 10 appointments, but every single time they close, it's $100,000 deal. I would I would be okay with that. In fact, that rep is probably better than the rep that closes 1 in 5, but every deal that he or she does is 30 to 40 grand. So I think that's kind of the metric that I want to establish with me being in closing. Like, what is the baseline? Like, what should be the revenue per issued appointment? And I had someone on the podcast a while back, a friend of mine who he tracks this metric. And he also found something else interesting, which I think is really important, which is that different reps have different show rates. And this metric takes that all into account, right? And what I mean by different reps have different show rates is I know when I go to an appointment, I've texted the person before, I've called them, I've texted them again when I'm on the way. So I have a pretty high show rate. But also, if I've gotten to an appointment and there's no one there, like I will, wait around for a bit, see if they show up. I'll go talk to the neighbors and see if they've seen them. So my show rate ends up being higher because I'm not just getting there, knocking on the door and saying, okay, they're not home, let me reschedule this. I'm going to get there, do all those things, call them, 5 or 6 times because we had a set appointment, right? And a lot of times that will increase the show rate. So I think that having that metric in there, that it's revenue per issued appointment, is better than revenue per held appointment, because you want to encourage your closers to have to do what they can to increase the hold rate on appointments. A couple other challenges that we've been facing on the sales side, and I'll talk about a couple of things that we implemented to overcome those challenges are, there's been a lot more stuff with the phone carriers now, and a lot more calls being coming through as spam on people's phones, specifically with Verizon. The other carriers, we already had a really good process in place where we remediate those numbers and build a reputation, so we were rarely getting flagged. But recently, Verizon came out with, I guess, a new program on how they did it. I don't know all the details. We use a company called Caller ID Reputation that helps us manage the reputation of those phone numbers. And this isn't just for cold calling where we're running into the issue. We are running into it in cold calling, but even for our acquisitions phone numbers were running into it. Even someone who inquires through our website and then we're making a call to them, if they have a Verizon phone, there's a decent chance that our number has been showing up as spam. So we are working with that company, Caller ID Reputation, we work with to help remediate those numbers, but we still, the last few weeks, has dramatically dropped our number of calls to a conversation. And actually, about last week, we were at, historically, we were about 1 in 3.5, 1 in 4 calls, someone would have a conversation with us. And when I say conversation, I mean, we define that as someone who spends a minute or longer with us on the phone. So not just someone who picks up the phone and hangs up. And about a week and a half ago, that number had gotten up to 10 or 11, which, as you can imagine, that's almost 3 times as worse. That means you need to make 3 times as many calls to get someone on the phone, which is challenging as a sales rep. If you're sitting there listening to the phone ringing, um, and you're not talking to people, it's hard to, you know, get appointments set. Um, so outside of doing what we're doing with trying to remediate those numbers and fix them, I also implemented, there was a software called Wave that I found, which now integrates directly with our CRM. So we built in a multi-line dialer directly in our CRM. So we go in and you can select the list of contacts. For example, you can select all new leads. You can go in, um, hit power dial, and it's going to triple line dial them. It actually even has a pretty cool feature where it does what we do manually, where it dials everyone twice in a row, which is more effective to get people to pick up. Now, that doesn't solve the issue that our numbers are showing up as spam. It just allows us, instead of making 125 calls per day, which is what we were doing previously, it's letting us make anywhere from 300 to 550 calls a day. And we're still getting, that lower answer rate. Maybe it's 1 in 10, 1 in 11. It's probably a little worse with the dialer because if two people pick up on once, it hangs up on one of them. But it is allowing us to get more people on the phone, and the reps are not listening as much to the phone ring all day. As a nice little side feature there's a way you could set it up where you actually don't have to listen to the phone ring. It just beeps when it connects to someone, which sounds like not a big deal, but for anyone here, I know I've been on the phone all day sometimes, and you kind of get tired of hearing that beeping. So that is kind of a nice feature, but that has helped us get in touch with a lot more people. I do still think we really need to solve this spam uh, flag issue. The other thing that we've been doing to try to get more people on the phone is I built something out in our CRM. Our CRM has a um, Chat GPT integration, and we have a field in the CRM called pain notes or reasons qualified. So that's when we spoke with the uh, prospect initially, or whenever we spoke with them, like, what kind of pain do they have? What are the reasons we qualified this lead? And then I wrote this Chat GPT prompt that takes that and creates a text message that's personalized to send to that person. And I don't mean personalized in the sense that all these texts that you get that are personalized that just have your first name in it. This will actually digest all the information that's in that field in the CRM. And sometimes it's, like a paragraph worth of stuff. And it will say something like, well, I mean, an example of it is if someone said previously that they were, tired of living in a house that needed tons of repairs, it'll reach out to them. It'll say, "Hey, Mike, last time you spoke with," and we'll reference who they spoke with previously, which I think is pretty cool. Last time you spoke with Mark on December 20th, you mentioned you were tired of living in a house that needed a bunch of repairs. Are you still exploring the idea of selling? And it will change the message too, like, of course, based on what is in that note section there, but it will also change the messaging, like the question at the end. And sometimes it will reference the city where the property is located, sometimes it won't. And My idea with this is that in the long term, it's like we track in our CRM the last time we had a conversation with someone. And I want to send this message for anyone who we haven't had a conversation with in 30 days. They should automatically go into this flow and be receiving this personalized text from us. And it's worked really well. I mean, we've done some drip campaigns before. I'll admit we've never been great at it, but the response with these has been pretty awesome. What happens then is, let's say that text message goes out, it's personalized, and they respond back, and then it actually shoots their response over to ChatGPT. And if they say something like, "No, I'm not interested," or not, not right now, ChatGPT interprets the message, and then it will say, "Okay, that person's not interested. Uh, Let me set a follow-up date for 30 days from now," and um, it'll set the follow-up date for 30 days from now, and then it will actually automatically archive their text message in the CRM, so the sales reps don't need to manually disposition every single message. Now, on the other hand, if they say something like it's sold, it will create a task in the CRM for our sales operations assistant, and she'll go in and check on Zillow or on the property appraiser to see if the property actually sold. A lot of times people will say that when they're just in contract with someone. So unless we see it sold on public records, we're not actually going to mark it sold and dead in our CRM. And then obviously the most exciting part is when someone is still exploring some options. So it analyzes that. If there's any kind of interest at all, even someone who says like make an offer all the way to, yeah, we're still looking into it, um, it takes that person, creates them as a new lead, and puts them back in the new lead pipeline so that the sales reps can reach out to them, and it notifies the sales reps immediately. So we actually, I was checking this morning, we actually booked an appointment uh, from this. So I think been a great thing for us when we can't necessarily get people to answer the phone. At least we're touching base with people to see, hey, is there still some level of interest in selling? And if there is, that at least allows us to narrow down the pool of people who we're trying to call. I think we have about 7,000 leads in our CRM from the past almost 4 years at this point. So, at any given time, and those are people who haven't sold, right? Because we ran a analysis in the CRM last quarter, and we eliminated uh, using some tools. We uploaded it to batch leads, and we eliminated everyone who had sold in the last 3 years. So those are people who raised their hand at some point in the last 3 years and haven't sold. So I think this will allow us not only to get in touch with people who aren't answering the phone, whether it's because of a spam issue or maybe they just don't answer their phone in general anymore because they get called so much. Um, but it also is going to help us really touch people who we haven't been able to, because if you're a sales rep, you're going to focus on like your hot and your warm leads, and you're probably not going to make it down to the other, 6,700 people in the CRM if you're already at capacity working through what you got. So that's a couple of things we've done, on the sales side in terms of acquisitions. We are still selling properties. We put something on the market 2 weeks ago, and we got 3 offers in the first weekend. That was actually the first time that's happened in years. But we have changed a little bit our renovations. We're doing a couple unique things just to make our property stand out a little bit more uh, from like your standard flip that's out there, because there is a lot of inventory. Um, so that's been working for us. Of course, we're still dealing, like everyone else, with a lot of seller concessions, a lot of requests that come back on inspections. But I think that's just the market we're in, and I think if we continue to improve on the acquisition side, I think that we, as long as we can acquire the property for the right price and we put out a really good product at a price that's pretty attractive, I think we'll be continue to be able to sell stuff. Right now, our main challenge is just getting more inventory at a price that makes sense for us to purchase it. But I'll give you guys an update in about, I think I'll be back on this in 4 weeks doing my solo episode. At that point, I will have been back in a closing for a month, and I'll let you know where we stand. So, all right, everyone, thanks for joining.